Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 1st of July 2023. I have a cup of tea. I'm doing this rather early today because my twin boys have a 5 kilometer mud race for life it is, for cancer research in nearby Portsmouth, and so I have to do a bit of a runner, take them over there and watch them do that. It is fundraising for cancer research. All the details are on my Twitter page if you have the wherewithal and ability to contribute to one of the twins' fundraising campaigns there. Thank you so much to those who already have. Anyway, let's get straight to it. It's not about that. So let's look at the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. 530 liquidated personnel. That is, it's dropped back down to the level it kind of was for some time. We are seeing, yes, attritional battles along the front line, but I don't think any mass attacks. They are fighting over trenches, which won't see huge losses, I don't think, of Russian troops, but it is strongly attritional. There are signs that morale is low. There are some signs that troops are possibly deserting as well, giving up. There was I think 50 was it Dagestanis? 50 Dagestanis, I think, just gave up their posts. Was one of the bits of information I've just seen on the front line there somewhere. So 1 tank, 5 APVs. Now we've got back to a huge artillery number, 35 artillery systems, 2 MLRS. That is a really phenomenal number. We had seen that drop back down. I was wondering whether they're just, running out of artillery pieces to hit, but that is going right back up to the higher end of the range there. 35. To lose 35 artillery systems in one day is significant. Yes, they have a lot. Yes, they probably have some stocks, but it's whether those stocks are of decent pieces of artillery in good working order. Probably not. They are something of a paper army, the Russians, and although they claim to have X, Y, and Z, they don't often have those, or they have them and they are falling apart and rusting. And as I keep saying, are those secondary pieces, are those artillery pieces that they can bring in to substitute for the broken ones, are they nearby? How long does it take them to get them there? So on and so forth. So all those problems exacerbated when 35 are taken out in one day. 26 drones. I don't think that's last night. I'm trying to. Information is quite low on the ground, really. Slim pickings for what's taken place over yesterday, both on the front line and in quite a lot of different contexts. So I don't know if the bandwidth is being taken up by the French riots. There's a lot of news on that, or whether things are just a little bit quieter just in general across Ukraine yesterday. 9 vehicles and then 11 pieces of special equipment. That could be ISR equipment, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. It could be electronic warfare. It could be excavators. You don't know. But 11 means that there's going to be some high value pieces of equipment in there. We are starting to get towards 2 pieces of equipment per day. So the average was less than 1 a day in this category before the counter-offensive started. And just in the run up to the counteroffensive and during it, we've just seen large numbers of these pieces of equipment taken out. I think the Russians are using more of this equipment. So you are starting to see your reconnaissance equipment being put up en masse and in places and all around the battlefield and in towns like Bakhmut. We saw a number, and I think they're using bits of equipment like that more than they were at the beginning of the war. So you will see higher numbers taken out now, but also I think the Ukrainians are targeting them more explicitly too. Anyway, let's move on, see if we can get some kind of understanding of these figures, whether they are accurate or not. Media Zona and the BBC have updated their figures. They're now above 26,800 for Russian soldiers who have been killed in the past 16 months. And that is your bare minimum, right? Is what Oryx do in terms of losses of equipment, visually confirmed losses. These are, if you like, visually confirmed human losses as per social media posts, death certificates, everything that the BBC and Media Zona can pick up on the socials and doing investigations. And they have a really high bar, actually. If someone dies and they think they might be at war, and their funeral is listed, but it doesn't explicitly say that they died in the war as a result of the war. If it's not explicit, they won't count them. So it's quite a tough, set of criteria to get registered for this piece of open source research. And so 26,801 is going to be your absolute bottom value. Uh, and it will likely be many times that, the real number, but it just gives you somewhere to start. And I think it's really good open source intelligence work done by those two institutions. Right. US supplied a Bradley M2A2 infantry fighting vehicle on the Zaporizhian front line, destroyed and being evacuated. For me, that's just a bit of T-cut and a buff up. That'll be back on the field in a couple of weeks, I would have thought. Not too bad. Just a pair of fluffy dice on that. We're going to talk actually about some of the Western supplied equipment and how, although some of it's being blown up, in larger numbers than one might want, the survival chances for the crew and for those inside are much higher, and that's been really beneficial for the Ukrainians. Right, going to indeed Oryx's visually confirmed losses for the Russians. We are starting to build up a pattern of numbers. Now, if you take some of these days, they do it every 2 days. Some of these days and look at them, you can see them out of context, and there might be anomalies. I said previously that there was a day when there were a bunch of pieces of equipment from right at the beginning of the war, Bayraktar drones, literally from February 2022, that were added to the Ukrainian losses, and that skewed the losses slightly and made you think that Ukrainians had a worse day than possibly they really did. So we need to look at these things over time, and I've shown you the last, I think, 3 of these when they've come out, to show you. And here's another one. So the Russians have lost 42 pieces of equipment here in total. That's 11 T-80s there. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 tanks out of 42. That is phenomenal. That's a huge loss. You look at the Ukrainian ones, 16 pieces of equipment. That's 5 tanks there. So you can see that the numbers are very different, and that is being consistent. So the Ukrainians are losing. It varies, right, depending on what the day has been, but they are losing fewer pieces of equipment than the Russians, and that is definitely true, and sometimes by over half. So this is what, a third, maybe, no, 2/5 of the equipment that the Russians are losing. So that's really significant. Another high value loss in terms of, that sounds horrible. This is a human being. We must remember that. But here's a Russian major who'd been in the Donbass since 2014, 68 Guards tank regiment. He was a casualty, a loss for the Russians there. The Ukrainians took him out. 2 videos this week showing the value of more survival Western equipment. If this had been a BTR BMP-1 instead of a Mastiff MRAP and a Bradley IFV, more Ukrainian casualties would have been sustained. This is actually going back to June the 10th. But this whole thread that Rob Lee's done talks about how there are losses to Ukrainian equipment, Western supplied Ukrainian equipment, but the people are surviving. Ukraine has also been operating at night this week, which would be difficult without the Bradleys. This equipment is never going to guarantee successful counteroffensive, but it is giving it a better chance of success. Ukrainian soldiers says that his Sisu 6x6 ABC was hit by 3 mines, but the crew survived. Post from a soldier from Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade who mentions how Bradleys and other Western equipment are saving lives because of their better survivability than Soviet-era vehicles. Here's a picture of a Ukrainian M2A2, another Bradley, and it withstood a direct strike from a Russian Grad rocket, and it's now being repaired, and the crew survived. Interview with a Russian tabloid, a Russian serviceman in the south said that Ukraine's foreign tanks are very accurate, particularly at night, and he praised the Leopard's thermal optics. Ukrainian Bradley again destroyed by the Russian army, according to the photographer. All the crew members managed to survive, and these are getting significantly damaged. And yes, we see plenty of pieces of footage of Russian pieces getting hit and crew often surviving. But it's the idea that you just have greater survivability in these. Ukrainian soldiers or Marines had positive things to say about the MX-10RC. That's a French wheeled light tank. Praised the accuracy of its cannon, though they didn't recommend using them in frontal assaults. And again, would you like to know a short summary about Western supplied vehicles? It was made for people. That's it, says this source. My friends from different units told me a lot of stories about how these vehicles saved a lot of lives. I know the fact about one, and it goes into that again and again. Uh, lots of claims concerning the survivability in Western vehicles. So that is really good news for Ukrainians. A bit of Russia on fire here. This is a significant explosion there of I think it was oxygen. Oxygen reacting with other chemicals, causing a blast in some kind of factory there. I saw China on fire, but this morning of a huge explosion at chemicals factory in China, like massive. Anyway, it's nothing to do with Russia. So and Ukraine. Here we have Berdyansk was hit the other day with storm shadows. I was talking about how that was an airfield with a lot of helicopters on, but it's unlikely that storm shadows get used to take out helicopters. They are it's not really the right weapon to do that. It's kind of a high value weapon to take out. Well, helicopters are high value, but are you going to strike that helicopter? Is it the right weapon to use for lots of helicopters on an airfield? I don't think it is. So anyway, during that I don't know whether this, I presume this was near Berdyansk, but during that time of attacking with Storm Shadows, there was one apparently that was intercepted, possibly the first Storm Shadow that has actually been intercepted. The Russians have claimed, as they do, that they have taken a huge number of Storm Shadows out. They make ridiculous claims about all sorts of things that they shoot out the sky, and it's almost invariably not true. But here, this could be the first time one has been shot. It's estimated that Ukraine has fired around 40 Storm Shadows since first using them in May. I thought that they would have fired more, but they've possibly only got a couple of planes that can fire them that have been made compatible. But so who knows? Anyway, here you've got evidence that it was indeed a storm shadow, and the claim here that possibly it was not shot out, it was just going for a bunker or something like that. But I don't know. Uh, I would. It looks like it has been shot down. It is in the middle of the field. Uh, and talking about that Berdyansk hit, that wasn't on the helicopters, it was on fuel and lubricants that were stored, I think, at the airbase, as well as the headquarters there too. So they're going for those, what they would deem as slightly higher value targets than taking out individual pieces of equipment. At least, that's how I'd interpret that. But yeah, significant hits taking place every night. I've not heard any kind of missile hits over last night or Shahid drones. There might have been some Shahid drones last night. I just haven't heard. It's like an hour and a half earlier than I normally check data, and a lot of data comes through in that an hour and a half. So I might well have missed some in this news update. To bear that in mind. This is just talking about the hit of the bridge, the Antonovsky bridge with the Iskander missile. This is an observation shared with me on this Iskander attack. The Ukrainian lodgement is spread over multiple clicks either side of the bridge. You would have to fly multiple heavy bomber with arc lights or drop several small tactical nukes to get them all. In fact, some Russians have been calling for tactical nukes to be used on that bridgehead, that literal bridgehead. At the Antonovsky Bridge. So hitting the bridge would not help. The narrowed Dnipro River could be crossed in multiple places, and the Russian armed forces reacted too slowly on this bridgehead. All of this is downstream of blowing up the Kakhovka Dam to allow the Russians to send their Kherson blocking force to Bakhmut and Zaporizhia. This is why the Russian evacuation of the nuclear power plant is so ominous. Russia blowing up the nuclear power plant to block large portions of this front is the same logic as blowing up the Kakhovka Dam. I mean, there's a lot of people worried about that. But this bridgehead is creating problems for the Russians. Indeed, this is what it looks like now after the uh, the the blow from the Iskander missile that you see in that smaller video in that there. So it's knocked out part of the bridge, but there are claims that actually there's a bunker entrance under the bridge, and they might be using a bunker there to hide out in, and this wouldn't have touched the sides really. But anyway, that is Russian destroyed the first span of the bridge from the side of the left bank of the river. The Russian occupied side, according to rumors, the Iskander was used. but I don't know that it actually did all that much damage to the Ukrainian personnel there. Right, this is huge news. This is really, really significant. Okay, what is it? Oh, in fact, that's in the wrong place. Uh, let's come on to that next. So I just want to talk about missile attacks still. This is kind of to do with missile attacks. If we discover gatherings like those in Kramatorsk, so the pizzeria that was hit by the missile in Kramatorsk that caused many civilians to die, says Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, we will destroy them because these are the people who declared war on us. Where do you start with that? I won't. I will dismiss that. But that is Russian nonsense. Sergei Lavrov just trying to is victim blaming. Is classic victim blaming. You started a war on us. No, no, no. You literally invaded our country, and you're sending munitions into cities to hit civilians and civilian infrastructure. Yeah, but you invaded. You started a war on us. No, no, no. We didn't. We literally didn't. Ridiculous. Anyway, this is a big piece of news I want to talk about as well. So, Prigozhin has closed the troll factory in St. Petersburg. You know, I told you on Monday and said on Monday and Tuesday, oh my goodness, there are no trolls. And the fact that all of the Russian voices disappeared from my threads at once for like a couple of days, a few of them are trickled back. They might not all be working in this troll factory, but they all suddenly disappeared. And it was like proof that they were trolls and not just random pro-Russian voices. Not like, hey, I'm X and Y from I'm a Democratic voter, I'm a black Democratic voter from America. It's like, interesting. Well, you disappeared for like 3 days when all the other trolls disappeared. So I don't think you are. Anyway, I think you are a Russian sitting in a troll factory in St. Petersburg. Turns out that for 3 days, no trolls were lovely on the threads, but the troll factory had been closed. And I said that might happen. It might be because Prigozhin is being investigated. Well, that's exactly what has happened. The news is reported by TG channel, Telegram channel Rotanda Media, which also shows electrical equipment seized by the FSB being returned to Prigozhin's business offices. So Russian media reported that Prigozhin's dissolved his media holding Patriot and the troll factory associated with it. The Bell previously reported that the holding is looking for a new owner and that its assets will be overseen directly by the Putin administration. Troll farm closed down. Trolls disappear. Now they are trickling back. They won't, as I say, won't all be from that one place, but there's certainly a lot less troll activity taking place, and it's really interesting. I declare that this is formal evidence that trolls exist. Right? A lot of people don't quite believe that you can have this proliferation of Russian trolls. That you know it's all kind of blown up by the media a bit more. No, 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 no. These entities exist. And here's evidence for that. Okay, alleged Wagner mercenary opens fire at an airport in Moldova. The shooter opened fire inside, which is now international airport, after he was denied entry to Moldova. Moldova's Ministry of Interior reported he killed a security guard and a policeman, taking the gun from the security guard's holster. He stole that and shot these two people. I don't think he is Wagner. The shooter at the airport, and she's now turned out to be 43-year-old Rustam Asharov, who has citizenship of Tajikistan and Russia. He was wanted by Interpol for the murder of an influential person. We don't really know the details there, but that is a Russian at nearby Moldova airport, taking out two security personnel. So that's not good there. Right, so let's move on to the front lines. There's not a huge amount of detail coming out on the front lines, but just to let you know, Shashank Joshi was getting into a bit of hot water with a lot of pro-Ukrainian commenters. He's the Economist defense correspondent, but he's been quite truthful here. So Zaluzhny was interviewed, and Shashank Joshi said Zaluzhny might be pissed off by people saying that the offensive has had a slow start, but it's unfortunately true. So Zaluzhny was saying, look, this isn't some Hollywood film. You might think it's a slow start, but we've got a really difficult job to do, type thing. But Shashank Joshi is saying, but it is true that it has been a slow start, as according to many people associated with the war. So, however much people on Twitter don't want to hear it, that isn't my view. It's a view of multiple officials familiar with the details. And he says the tweet below provoked the usual pearl clutching. I'd rather be honest and accurate than boosterish. Fact is, the offensive is behind the timeline Ukraine and allies expected and hoped, even if we all knew it would be hard. That doesn't mean it's failed. It does create challenges, e.g., ammo consumption. This is where I want to go with this. There are lots of people sort of talking about this, and basically it's down to like minefields, but also down to one reason it's slower than Ukraine and allies expected is that Russia is fighting further forward than expected. So yeah, the minefields are problems, but also they weren't expecting the Russians to do this defense by offense. They've been really putting up a lot of resistance in trying to hold on to these settlements, particularly in the Velika Novosilka axis and the Vasilivka axis in Piatichatki area. They are just fighting for every meter of ground, a bit like Bakhmut for the Ukrainians. And rather than falling back to more quickly to prepared defenses, that comes at a cost to Russia and would have consequences if Ukraine didn't eventually achieve a breakthrough. So, while it is being slow, I guess this is what I've been saying. The positive is it is attriting and fixing Russian troops. That is definitely what's happening. But there is a lot of pushback to his kind of reality, dose of reality there. That there are many people associated, and elsewhere in this thread. I mean, he gets involved in this thread quite a bit to defend his position. He's saying, "Look, I'm a journalist. I'm speaking to people you're not, and you're coming on and telling me you're being really overtly pro-Ukrainian and really positive. Great, but actually, the reality is." This is going slower than people expected, and I've literally kind of spoken to these people. So you know, what you think is kind of less important is what he's saying. So it's an interesting thread, and there are some little nuggets in there from here and there. So Zelensky, in an interview with the Spanish newspaper El Mundo, explained the slow pace of the counteroffensive. If the fields are mined, we can't send our soldiers to die. So you put active defense with minefields, and things become slow and attritional. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces continue defensive operations in the Melitopol, that's in Zaporizhia Oblast, and Berdyansk directions. Melitopol would be the Vasilivka area, so Piatichatki and south of Orikhiv and Malotokmachka, whereas Berdyansk direction would be down from Velika Novosilka. So there's still activity there. The Ukrainian General Staff said that Ukrainian forces achieved partial success in the Levadne Priutne line, so that's just south of the Velika Novosilka area, and on the administrative border, that is the administrative border between Donetsk and Zaporizhia, and also on the Malotokmachka line, which is further to the west, where Robotina is that area. So that's where there is partial success. So they are still creeping forward. Deputy Defense Minister reported that the Ukrainian forces are confidently advancing on Bakhmut's flanks and that Russian forces have transferred a large number of troops to the area. So possibly greater success around Bakhmut. But there is talk, Cherevati, the spokesperson of the Ukrainians, saying that the Russian contingent now around Bakhmut is above 50,000, never went below 35,000, but another 15,000 troops there. They are supporting the Bakhmut sector with a lot of reinforcements, which is good for the Ukrainians because that fixes and attrits the Russian troops there rather than elsewhere, and leaves weaknesses elsewhere. But that gives you an understanding of how difficult it could be in a Bakhmut area for the Ukrainians having to push back that number of troops. So it is heavily defended. However, they are doing actually fairly well in Bakhmut. And interestingly, so here's a bit of footage. This is only relevant. Yeah, wow, 2 tanks firing stuff around Bakhmut. So what, you might ask. But actually, the use of combined arms around Bakhmut is something that wasn't happening with the Russians. So the Russians, yeah, they were using artillery, actually a little bit of aviation as well at certain points, but they didn't really use any mechanized equipment. So when they were doing their assaults, it was kind of like just throwing in waves of troops or doing things primarily with infantry, with support from mortar and artillery. But actually, the Ukrainians, I think, are using a bit of everything. Maybe not so much aviation in that particular area, but I think it's significant when you see overt evidence of of mechanized equipment being used. Speaking of which, a Russian tank being hit, attacking the Antonovsky bridge, and then retreating after being hit by two ATGMs, and then sort of falling off the side of the road there. Not doing too well. So that's after the Iskander, I think, hit there. Not 100% sure. That might be the area of the Antonovsky bridge much further down. So the bit that was blown up is much further up here. This is an area of water where I think the Ukrainians have been sending in kamikaze boats. So there's an island part here, and the bit that is kind of hit where the bridgehead is much further up this road. They're using remote mines around here. They're sending remote mines to litter the road that comes in, so that when the Russians try and send in mechanized equipment to support their efforts further up, then they get blown up. This is what reporting from Ukraine's video was about today. But the Ukrainians have been using kamikaze drones, but USVs, unmanned sea vehicles, packed with explosives at that part of the bridge as well. The occupiers refused to fight in the Zaporizhia region, says the General Staff. In particular, in the Drozhnyanka area, about 50 Dagestani soldiers voluntarily left their combat positions, and the available weapons were put out of order by the Russian responders. So, as I say, the morale is low. Things aren't great for the Russians. Now, in the Antonovsky, that was out of position. In the Antonovsky bridge area, the Ukrainians continue to build up reserves. Russian forces tried to oust Ukrainian defenders with slight success. So they are giving the Ukrainians a rough time, although Ukrainian artillery is active and fights continue. Remote mining continues, and they inflict Russian losses. So, yeah, a lot of heavy fighting around the Antonovsky bridge area. Right, military aid. Taiwan has sent, or at least they are to send. I don't know. I think they might have sent. That might have already got there. 22 ambulances, 6 fire engines, 8 vans, and 7 jeeps. Really super important for the Ukrainians. That's great from Kindred Spirit, as it says, Taiwan. Poland is to send 60 additional PT-91 main battle tanks. These are upgraded T-family tanks to get a Polish upgrade. However, there are claims that actually that is a mistranslation, and it is not an additional 60. They're talking about the 60 that were already given. So I would like to know if that's definitely true. But it'd be great if they get another 60 of these. It'd be superb to just continually replenish stocks that get sort of damaged and lost. More support from Lithuania, that is Lithuania, to Ukraine in response to Ukraine's request for assistance in strengthening air defense. Now, I think I've already talked about all of this. I don't think this is new, but it's all putting it in one place. So they're actually, no, it's not. The other tweet that I didn't include here has all the other stuff. So 2 NASAMS are being purchased and will be with the Ukrainian army within 3 months. So they are purchasing 2 of these NASAMS units, air defense units that are really good, plus a bunch of other stuff. I think there's 10 M113s are reported as well, and some ammunition and so on and so forth. So they're coming up with the goods. That's fantastic. Now, I'm including this because I'm fairly sure these are Ukrainians just waiting. It could even still be in like Germany or Poland or somewhere. Who knows? But it's just the amount of equipment. Holy cow! I literally just muted that. Oh well, part of the course, right? Just a load of equipment and personnel. I mean, look at all of that equipment. Just absolutely phenomenal. So that gives you hope, going forward. We are only seeing these probing vanguard attacks at the moment to try and find weaknesses. The main bulk of the offensive has not even, is not even there yet. Anyway, this is possibly something to worry about, or possibly an indication that Russia are in trouble. The most important manufacturer of armored vehicles in Russia, the company Uralvagonzavod, suspends all other activities and switches to mass production of tanks. Now, this either says that they are desperate and in a lot of trouble and they're not producing enough tanks as it is, so they need to up the production. Then you've got the issue that we still don't know how many they can produce, whether they are able to produce significant numbers of tanks. that's the one end of the spectrum. So it could be like you don't really need to worry about this from a pro-Ukrainian point of view, but from a Russian point of view, pro-Russian point of view, you might see this as like, well, they're getting onto a war footing, and they're now going to start producing decent numbers of tanks. Now 16 months later, going to produce decent numbers of tanks to help support their war effort. We don't know. We don't know how many tanks they can produce a day, a week, a month, and whether this will make any difference. It could either be something to, as I say, indicate that they're in a lot more trouble than they would like to admit, or it's showing they're doing the right things to produce, but too little, too late. One might argue to produce tanks for their front line. Iran supplies Russia with 50 to 70 kamikaze drones every 2 to 3 weeks. As far as missiles are concerned, Russia will not be able to carry out missile attacks on that scale or on the scale of last autumn, says Budanov. But 50 to 70 kamikaze drones every 2 to 3 weeks is not going to be nice for the Ukrainians. That the Iranians really are helping, but they are, I guess, not able to give those saturation attacks they once were in terms of missiles and drones. But it still is an issue for the Ukrainians there. Going on to geopolitical stuff, Hungary again being the fly in the ointment. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban wants to block the European Commission's plan to provide Ukraine with 50 billion euros. We Hungarians will not give more money to Ukraine until they tell us where the previous 70 billion euros, where it is, what it's being used for. And I guess, there maybe is some merit in that. You do need transparency and understanding that money is being used correctly and for good purposes. But this is still yet another example of Viktor Orban being a bit of a sod, to put it mildly. A record high 89% of Ukrainians want to join NATO, poll shows. Public support for Ukraine's accession to NATO and EU reaches history's highest level, according to Kyiv International Institute of Sociology survey. So when we're looking at what Putin's objectives were for this war, he's just failed miserably because he's actually the opposite has been achieved. So he's strengthening unity in the EU, Orban aside, strengthening unity in the EU, strengthening unity in NATO. NATO have got bigger and are expanding, and more people in Ukraine feel Ukrainian. The Ukrainian identity has been solidified, and more people have a positive outlook of NATO and the EU and want to join both. I mean, yeah, that's a big failure for Putin. Now, I said yesterday that Mike Pence, who was vice president to Trump, has gone to Ukraine. That's interesting messaging. Lots of people quite correctly said actually he's deeply unpopular right across the spectrum. So obviously Democrats hate him. He's a typical, fiercely conservative in social, economic ways, all the ways. He's a really conservative person. So Dems don't like him. He's also Trump's number two. But actually, MAGA Republicans don't like him either, because if you remember the 6th of January insurrection where they were calling to hang Mike Pence, he became the guy that didn't stand in the way of a free and fair transfer of the peaceful transfer of power, and they're expecting him to stop the count type thing. And he didn't, and so he's actually hated by them. So, and many of the normal kind of fiscal conservatives, maybe your Reagan Republicans, as I'm sure some of you in the threads are, might look at him as being too Trumpish, and so therefore he's kind of left without much support, right? So he's not particularly popular with anyone, and actually he's somewhat devoid of character and charisma. So he's saying all the right things with regard to Ukraine at the moment, but that could fall on deaf ears or actually work against Republican support for Ukraine in a funny way. And I'm no fan of Mike Pence. I once wrote a comment that got turned into a meme, which is he's the festering pimple on the arse of a megalomaniacal narcissist, I think was my quote. The festering pimple on the arse of a megalomaniacal narcissist. Anyway, this interview is spot on. He absolutely nails it, and there's loads of great stuff. I don't. It's 10 minutes long, so 11 minutes long. So I'm not going to go through it, but I might dip into it in my extra if I get a chance to do one today. So he says all the right things here. One of the phrases he used that I really like is that the US is democracy's arsenal, and I like that. It's a really good phrase, and actually. Yeah, America's the world's policeman and stuff, but democracy's arsenal. I quite like that. Anyway, just saying everything he said there, as far as I've listened, I haven't listened to a whole of it, but I was like, actually, yeah, Mike Pence, you are on the money with all of that. And if that convinces anyone, that sometimes, when people are being competent, we need to say, yeah, well done, you are being competent. Not that that should be a surprise, but we should laud competence, and I like it when that happens. I listened to um, what was it? The FP at the foreign policy, some foreign policy organization. Anthony Blinken did a talk. It was like a 45-minute talk, and I will show you this in an extra. He was really competent. I was like, do you know how nice it is to have people in American government at the moment who I think are just really competent at their jobs? Anthony Blinken is one of them. Uh, and just stuff he was saying is like, thank goodness you've got an adult in the seat there, just saying really competent stuff, and it's not always been the case, particularly over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and that was really good. So Anthony Blinken is a hugely important component of the American posturing on Ukraine. So yeah, that's significant. Anyway, Mike Pence saying the right stuff. Whoop-de-doo, but yeah, good that more people say the right things. Anyway, thank you so much. That's my news piece. I've got to rush now. I won't get the counteroffensive. Sorry, I won't get the Frontline update out on time. So I am scheduling an extra in place, and I'll do my Frontline update later in the day. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.